you want to take grade 6 ABRSM exam in any subject, including voice, you have to have first done your grade 5 theory. And you have people, well, a few people that cross exam boards, they just go, oh, I'll do grade 6 in something else where the theory isn't required. And actually that's short-sighted. You're sort of kicking the can down the road a bit, because actually as music becomes more complex, it's like learning a foreign language. The grammar becomes more complex. You're learning particles and honorific speech and, you know, sort of formal and informal, all of that sort of stuff. So the grade 5 theory is actually a really useful thing to have, because it really gets you going with how to be creative with that language. If you can play this, chances are you know how this works, or vice versa. And things like this. Don't ask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to come up with a crib sheet that you can use in your exam. Sure, you can't take it into the room with you, but if you learn how to construct it, you can just have it in front of you, and it makes a massive difference to learning about scales and sharps and flats and keys and names of notes and all of that stuff. Let's have a look. Here you are then with your blank sheet of paper. You're in the exam room. We're just going to make a quick sheet up. Shouldn't take you longer than about 5 minutes. And then that means that you can then use it to sort of double check your answers and all of that. So first of all, at the top, I'm just going to do 2 octaves of a piano. And there are your black notes that you have on the piano. You can shade them in if you like. I wouldn't bother, it's fine. And then just the lines that divide them like this. That divide those notes up. If you know where one note is on the piano, you know where they all are. So C, and then you can just go up to your next C and down to the C at the bottom. 2 octaves so that you can, if you've got a scale that starts on G, you've always got an octave that you can play with. You're not going to sort of run out of notes or have to sort of count round the back or whatever. So the next thing to do then is to do your circle of fifths. Now this is how scales work. So we've just got a circle here. C is at the top, like that. Then we've got G, D, A, E, B, F sharp at the bottom, which is also known as G flat. So those are kind of linked together at the bottom. And then the other side, we've got F, B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. And there we are. So I'll just put C in at the top as well so that you can just see that it's related to the keyboard there. Now we have relative minors to look at as well. So we have A minor, E minor, B minor, F sharp minor, C sharp minor, G sharp minor, D sharp minor, which is also E flat minor. Then we've got B flat minor, F minor, C minor, G minor, and D minor. Now the order of these letters, whether you're on the inside of the circle with your minors or the major ones on the outside, is Father Charles goes down and ends battle. Father goes down and ends battle. Goes down and ends battle. Father Charles goes down, ends battle. Father Charles. This pattern is to be repeated everywhere. Now if we put sharps over here and flats, and I'll write out that Father Charles goes down and ends battle because it's really useful. And I'm just going to number these keys going round to 6 at the bottom. And then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then sort of 0 at the top. This basically says for a major scale that you have round here, you either have sharps in that scale or you have flats depending on the key. So I'm just going to put Father Charles goes down and ends battle. So it's that way for your sharps and this way for your flats. You think, well, how does this work then? Well, it's all to do with key signatures. So if I'm just going to cheat and use my music pencil, my music pen here. £6.50 from Amazon. Really, really useful. So I'm going to write in treble clef. the order of sharps that you have in your key signature is exactly as it says here. So we've got F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, and B sharp. Now, in the theory question itself, it has something where you have a multiple choice question that says, well, which of these key signatures is correctly written? And you might find that the F sharp and the G sharp are next to each other and then the C sharp. So remembering this order is really going to help. Now, for the flats, it's the same sort of thing. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. So these are arranged in a bit more of a neater order than this. It starts getting a bit random after the initial sharps and flats, as the initial group of sharps there. So that's how you would write them out. Now, on the same line here, we need to make sure that we know where middle C is on every clef. So if I just put middle C here, we have bass clef, we have tenor clef, we have alto clef, and we have treble clef. Those are the 4 clefs that you need to know for your grade 5 theory. And you think, well, why do I need tenor clef? Well, lots of cellists use tenor clef. Alto clef is a viola clef. You know, the cello can switch between any of these. A trombone could be reading in tenor clef. There's all sorts of reasons why this needs to be learned. And also it means that you can communicate with your other musicians that you have either working with you or in your studio or wherever. So middle C in the bass clef is just above the line. And it's kind of, well, some people says it looks like a planet with the rings around it. Then we have middle C on tenor clef, middle C on alto clef, and the middle C on treble clef. And that's how that works. So the way that the tenor clef works, or the tenor or alto clef, is that you've got the middle of your sort of slightly looks like a 3 is going to be your middle C. Middle C on the bass clef and middle C on the treble clef are kind of opposite ends of the stave, so it's all sort of quite convenient to learn. Now, the next thing to look at, just aside from this, is the rhythms that you would have. So that is 4 beats. Now, I'll explain this in a minute because beats isn't strictly true, but it's actually a really good place to start. The Americans call it a whole note. And actually, I'm an advocate of the American system because it's more sort of pertains to the mathematics, the arithmetic of how it works. Now, we've got 2 beats here. Half note. 1 beat. Quarter note. Half, quarter. And if you go another one, you get an 1/8. So I'm just saving a bit of space here. So they call that an 1/8 note and 16th note. And if you're programming on a computer, you're going to be working with 8ths and 16ths rather than their sort of musical sort of strict names where you have a semibreve. So these need to be known as well. Then you have a minim. Then you have a crotchet. Then you have a quaver. And a semiquaver. Those of you who are looking at the spelling of crotchet, I'm not sure if I've got that right or not. Anyway, so moving swiftly along, we're nearly at the end of our sheet. Scales have technical names for each note of the scale. So we have the first of the scale, the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and then the 8th again, which I'm going to put in brackets because it's the same as the first. So we have tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, which is 6. Apologies, it's slightly off there. Leading note is number 7. The leading note, in harmonic terms, always resolves to the tonic. Well, not always resolves, but it's a way of sort of remembering that. Now, we've got intervals to look at as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over the page and just continue on the back here. Or you can have a second sheet, as the pen's gone through that a little bit. So, intervals. Now, this is how a pair of notes looks like on the page. So, for example, if I have my music pen again there, if we've got, well, just looking at treble clef, for example, this interval here, where you have 2 spaces or 2 lines, that is called a fifth. Because there are 5 notes. If we count E as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the line there for your B. That is a fifth. Now, it's strictly called something, actually, it's called something else. Both of these are perfect fifth intervals. So this is all to do with how a scale works. So, for example, if I've got this, or this, that's a second. And what you have to do is, depending on if one of them's a sharp or a flat, you have to put a word in front of it to describe actually what the interval is. So your first task is to get the number. So, for example, there's a seventh. You can have intervals of greater than an eighth or an octave. So, for example, if I've got this, I've got a ninth. But you can actually call it a compound second, because it's a second but with an octave added. So that's what the compound bit means. Now, the number of semitones between the intervals, and this is where your piano diagram will come in handy. If you're presented with an interval like, I don't know, for example, this. If you're presented with that, counting the notes, that's a seventh. But there's quite a lot more to it than that. Now, if we look at the semitones between F sharp and E flat, we've just got to check. F sharp, there's your F sharp there, 0 semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to your E flat. You think, well, how's that going to work then? Well, we've got the intervals in terms of semitones. Now, these can be called quite a few different things. So if you learn this, try and learn the page. The best thing to do, obviously, with learning something like this, stick them on your fridge, and every time you go past, you just remember the thing, how the thing works. Minor second, major second, minor third, major third. Perfect fourth. Now, the reason it's called perfect is really, it's kind of it's the laws of physics, that this is a sort of a direct ratio. The notes together sound quite pleasing, quite pleasant, quite sort of direct and dry. And then you have perfect fifth as well, which is kind of, it's really the sort of building block of music, and the harmonic series is all to do with fifths and thirds. So I'm just going to leave number 6 out for the minute. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Then we have minor sixth, major sixth, minor seventh, major seventh, and octave. It's sometimes also known as a perfect octave, but actually that's kind of just, don't worry about the perfect for octave, it's just octave. Or you could say eighth, but octave really is the thing to look at. Now, just a moment ago, I pointed to the F sharp to the E flat being a seventh, and it was 9 semitones. but we've got a major sixth here. It's not a sixth, it's a seventh. So for every minor interval, if you go back a semitone, it becomes a diminished interval. Oh, diminished seventh. So you could have a diminished sixth, you can have a diminished fifth, and actually that's one of the ones that's at number 6 here. We have an augmented fourth and a diminished fifth. And don't forget, it's how it looks on the page that makes the difference. So for example, if I was to just do an example over here, A to D sharp is 6 semitones, but it looks like a fourth on the page. 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. So it's an augmented fourth. But if I had an A and an E flat, it's the same sound, but the writing is different. We've got 5 notes here, but we've closed the gap a bit. We've gone from perfect fifth to diminished fifth. So it's theoretically possible to get an augmented or a diminished in any of these. You know, if you had C to D double flat, for example, you think, oh, come on. You know, you can express it in terms of that distance, in terms of those sort of distances of augmented and diminished and that sort of thing. A diminished third would be a C. For example, if I just do that, a diminished third, we have a C and an E double flat. Looks like 3 notes on the page, but it isn't. So you've got only 2 semitones between that. So you've got a major second, but it's not a second, it's a third. So we've got ourselves a diminished third. So really, this is kind of how music theory works. I've just touched on the rhythm side of things here, but just lastly, I'm going to just deal with time signatures. Now, time signature means what is contained within a bar of music. So I'm just going to do a single line instead of the 5 lines from my treble or bass clef. So, for example, this bar here has 4 quarter notes. This bar here, so if I do 6 of those, and I'm going to group these in a certain way, so I'm going to explain this in kind of one fell swoop. We have 6 eighth notes. And some people say, well, it's the same as 3/4, isn't it? You think, no, it's not. This is a compound time signature. So what that means is there are actually 2 beats here. But we have these particles in between. 1 and a, 2 and a. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is especially, this is of interest to drummers who are sort of learning about time signatures, and essentially drumming is all about timing. There's a lot, of course, a drummer would say, well, yes, tone out of the drums and musicality. Of course, that happens with every musical instrument. But, drums is, obviously rhythm is the main thing here. So you can have any other time signature. You could have 5/16ths, for example. You think, okay. So you might have something like this. A group of 2 and a group of 3. You think, well, there's not really any need to group these, but actually it makes it easier for the musician if they can think in more familiar terms in 2s and 3s rather than 5s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That sort of thing. Now I'm just doing a whistle stop tour here, but if we go back to a bar of 4/4, and I have 2 eighth notes, so that's my first beat, and then I could have something like this. Now here, usually, if we just ignore the triplet for a moment, it would be 2/16ths and an eighth would make your quarter, would make your beat. But if you need to fit 3 of these in the space of 2, what we do is we just write the 3 and we put a bracket marked 3, which means that 3 go in the space of 2. You could have this. We could have 5. I'll just complete the bar here. Okay, so we've got 5 demi-semiquavers in the space of a quaver, followed by 3 semiquavers in the space of a quaver. So that's actually a whole beat there. You can get all sorts of combinations, but just knowing these concepts and all of the others in this video, I hope that makes some sort of sense.